episode of to have you back with us. I am over caffeinated because I had to give a keynote at 7, which was like 2 hours ago. So we are ready to go. Today, we have a very exciting guest for me personally, someone that I personally have worked with during my time at Acquia on my first contract, which was called Batcave. So today we have a very special guest who's going to share with us her journey as a hearing impaired individual in the modern day tech workplace. We are joined today by Lindsey Mitros. Miss Lindsey, please introduce yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first, thank you everyone for listening in. And first, I want to thank the Cyber Queens, Amber and Mel, for having me on this podcast. I'm very honored. I am a fan as well. But yeah, so I'm Lindsey Mitros. I am the Information Security Systems Officer for Rubicon, which is a software development company. We work with government agencies. So I'm basically what you would say. I'm a compliance officer, making sure that we're making sure all the controls are in place in the cyber world. Um, I originally was a marketing major, which is totally different than what I do now. But I'll get into that story of how I got into cyber. I tell you my story. So what happened was when I was a year old, I was over my great grandmother's house, who was a very stubborn Italian Polish lady. We always had homemade sauce and spaghetti every Sunday. It was a tradition in the family.
We had that last night. we had spaghetti night last night.
Yeah, and there was this one day she opened these cabinets and all these pots and pans just fell right out, and I didn't react. And then there was another moment. A close family friend was playing the piano, and I was sitting on his lap. I was probably maybe 13, 14 months old at the time, singing and clapping, and I didn't react. So after a couple relatives and family friends, they expressed their concern, my parents took me to the doctor to take a hearing test because they said, no, I think there's something wrong. I think maybe she can't hear. But back then, they didn't mandate hearing tests until 1993, and I was born in 1985. Well, so that's why they didn't catch it earlier. So I was diagnosed with profound sensorineural hearing loss, which is only 10% of hearing in both ears. And it was a very difficult time for my family and friends and my parents because they had to make a decision whether I should be in the hearing world or the deaf world. So when you're in the hearing world, I mean, you have to remember back then they didn't think a deaf child can speak or hear or actually adapt in the hearing world. But people learn ASL sign language in the deaf world. So my mother believed that I could speak and hear just like everyone else with hearing aids. Well, that definitely wasn't an easy journey.
Wow. Go ahead.
But yeah, so I can talk about, like my challenges, growing up as a child. So I was the moment that I was diagnosed, it's been nonstop. I had to go to speech therapy, lip reading, how to articulate sounds, like feeling the vibration in the speech therapist's neck. But that was the only ways for me to learn how to speak.
Now, I want to ask a question. So right before we went live, I had to ask Lindsey, are you technically deaf? Are you hearing impaired? And how do I refer to you correctly? And she told me, what did you say? You said officially, technically you are deaf, but since you have a cochlear implant, you are now labeled as hearing impaired.
Yeah.
So cochlear implants are a rather new technology for persons without hearing. Can you tell us about I know we're deviating a little bit, but can you tell me about when that came out and when you started evaluating that as a solution and your journey about kind of evaluating if that could help you? And did that take you, did you end up growing up in the hearing world? Did your parents keep you in the hearing world? Okay. How did that help? How did that, make it possible for you to do certain things in life?
Well, so when I wore hearing aid is more of like amplifying sound. So everything was always very muffled. I couldn't even hear my own voice. And I couldn't really hear music. It was just very muffled. And so my speech still needs a little work, but it's definitely a lot better with the cochlear implant. But the reason why I was deaf is because we need hair cells to send the sound wave to your brain, and that's how you process sound. I didn't
Mhm.
have hair cells. For the cochlear implant, there's what you would call 22 electrodes in the cochlea, and each one of those electrodes has different frequencies of sound. So, like from a high pitch to a low pitch. Basically, I have a computer chip in my head. I get computer updates in my head, and everything's programmed, through the computer. So I have to go through a lot of programming to make sure I fit the right level of sound, into the level that my brain can process it. That took quite some time. So when I first got my first cochlear implant, which is 25, so having to wear hearing aids for 25 years, the doctor was actually very concerned because my brain hadn't been simulated for so long and had never processed sound. So a cochlear implant is very powerful.
Mm.
He said we should give it a try. I mean, it's a very risky surgery. They drill a hole in your skull, and you're at a risk for like having a brain injury. I mean, and you lose all of your natural hearing. So if it didn't work, I would not be able to go back to hearing aids. So that was the risky part. But I had no issue. But what happened was back in 1980, that's when the cochlear implant came out. But it wasn't very well known. Like the success rate wasn't as high as it was over the years. And I knew I wanted to wait till technology had evolved. So around 2010, that's when I got my first cochlear implant, and I was inspired by another woman who I used to work with, and she had basically the same level of hearing loss as I did, and she inspired me to go for it. So um, it was scary because I was a different person before I had my cochlear implant. Like I felt like I was a deaf person, although people um, although people visualized me as a hearing person because I was in the hearing world, but there have been situations where they didn't, and I'm sure I'll get into that later. But just to make a story, uh, get to the point of the story, it changed my life. I wasn't able to hear on the phone. I was able to hear my own voice. I had much more confidence in myself. I didn't feel like I was being discriminated like I was when I wore hearing aids. But yeah, so hopefully that answers all
Yeah.
of
Yeah, absolutely did. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. And, it just sounds like you've had such a tough go of it, especially growing up and having to navigate different challenges. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about, the challenges that you struggled through or faced or, kind of overcame in childhood and, how you managed to overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, so I just want to say elementary school was probably the most difficult time for me. Um, so after going through intensive therapy, speech therapy, lip reading, learning how to hear with the hearing aids, they gave me the go ahead to go to preschool for special ed. It wasn't just deaf children, it was also children with all different kinds of disabilities. But my mother, luckily, I was lucky that my mother was a part of a school district that we lived in, and she had connections with teachers and principals, and we got a lot of support. And she was a huge advocate for myself as well as other deaf children to make sure that we were getting the accommodation that we need to be mainstream in the elementary school. Um, but the challenges I would say is, I would go both ways. Like I was in the deaf class and like I was in the hearing impaired class. I'm sorry, the hearing classes. When I was in the hearing classes, I've had kids bully me. I was afraid to wear my hair up because they would look at my hearing aids and say, "Ew, what is that behind your ear?" They're always just pointing at me. I even had one kid pull them out of my ear and threw them against the room. And I can never forget the feeling I had just sitting in the corner, just crying. And, teachers back then, ADA wasn't as effective back then, but they didn't really tell the kids, like, real bullies. I mean, it's such a different world today, but
Yeah.
so I had to overcome that. But there were some teachers, mainstream teachers, that did not want to teach me. They said, I can't teach a deaf child how to read. I can't.
Hmm.
I can't, they just didn't believe in me. And I remember there was a time we had to stand up in front of the class and read a paragraph from a book. I didn't know which paragraph or what page to read. And the kid that was sitting next to me gave me the wrong page on purpose.
Oh.
I read a whole new different page in front of the whole class, and they all laughed at me, and I didn't know why. So it was like that kind of feeling. Like I can still remember the people that bullied me, and I'll still never forget the feeling I've had. But it was always a feel of fear, low self-esteem. But that is what pushed me to want to prove everybody wrong.
So not only did you overcome the hurdle of having to learn to speak and pronounce words out loud, but then you had to deal with, the mindsets and the bias and, kids.
Yeah.
We all love kids. Kids are our shining future, but they can be a little cruel sometimes. So we're sorry that you had to endure that from your fellow classmates who you should be able to rely on to help you,
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, and this is not a question we asked her beforehand, but I wonder, as someone who had to make that decision between growing up in the hearing world or the deaf world, I imagine you feel like you didn't really belong in either. Like in the hearing world, you were just seen as like a troubled deaf person, but in the deaf world, they probably wouldn't have fully, accepted you either because you do have the cochlear implant. Is that a bias that you encounter?
Yeah, so that was the other thing. It was almost like it was confusing for me. Like I was in both worlds, and not that it was a bad thing, but I think that's what you have to figure out. Where do you fit in? So over the years, I realized, okay, I want to be in the hearing world, and probably because I had a lot more hearing friends than my deaf friends, because most of my deaf friends did sign language, and I didn't know sign language at the time. I still don't. I wish I did, but the reason is because when I went to the speech and hearing center, they said if you learn sign language, you're going to stick with that language and you're not going to be able to speak or hear. So that was the reason why I was not taught sign language. But I know that my deaf friend didn't like that. I have a lot of deaf friends who are like, they received a cochlear implant and they say, oh, this is not right for me. So they choose to go in the deaf world, continue ASL, and they're happy with that. And I respect that so much. But I've had a couple of deaf friends that I did not want to talk to me because I chose to join the other world. Some of them feel the cochlear implant is changing their culture. But I'm hoping that's not what the message is. But yeah, it was very confusing, and that's why I was scared to get the cochlear implant because I knew I would be a different person. Like, I felt like I was a deaf child deep inside, but on the outside, I was viewed as a hearing person, even though there's some people that didn't view me that way. But yeah, it was like trying to figure out what identity I was, But I am happy to say I am in the right place. After the cochlear implant, it's given me confidence to know who I want to be and who I really am.
That's
So
amazing. And I was going to say for our listeners, what made you, at what point did you decide I want to be in tech, right? I want to have a job in tech. I mean, you've overcome so many obstacles, and I feel like, all of our, trials and tribulations that we go through in life kind of help build us into what we are and bring a different background and experience, diversified experience, if you will, to every career. And I want to hear what caused you to want to get into tech and kind of, stuff that you've gone through in your childhood that you had to overcome that actually helps you in your job today. Any kind of mechanisms?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I went to Penn State, and even all through high school, I always enjoyed my science class. We didn't really have computer classes back then, maybe typing or learning Microsoft Office, but I was always like very interested in computers and technology. And I was actually really good at it. And then I remember my mother was like, well, why don't you go to college for technology? You know, information systems was like the major back then.
Right.
But I was like, well, there's not too many women or girls at the time. And I've had a couple of teachers say, oh, I don't know if that's a good major for her. I probably shouldn't have listened to them, but I just didn't feel like I had enough confidence to get into technology in college. But that changed when I got my first job out of college. I worked for a printing company. I was a marketing major, even though I really didn't like marketing, but I felt like I had to pick an easy major because, to be honest, it was really hard for me to get a job in the workplace with my disability. I would love to share that with you later on, but I was giving technology projects while I was working for the printing company, and it was only because they didn't have enough people. And I said, well, I'll take this on. And some people were like, well, you don't know any technology. I said, well, I can do this. So I learned some coding. Java was a big thing back then. I don't even know if anybody's using Java right now, but I learned how to
The
do
entire internet still uses JavaScript, but that's about it that I'm aware of.
But I was like, wow, I can actually do this. Like, I guess it was just like a natural ability. I taught myself basic Java coding and some HTML, which is more of a website. But anyway, so I got some experience with that, and I really enjoy technology. I was like, I can actually do this. Like, why didn't I go to college for this? You know? So, and then I was like, I'm gonna go back to school. This was after my cochlear implant. I had much more confidence. I'm like, I can go back to school. I can hear better now because when I went to college at Penn State with 200 to 500 students, I had to sit in the first row and make sure that I could read the professor's lips. But there are times they didn't even look at me. I always had to remind them. So note taking wasn't very good for me. I used to have people write notes for me, but they weren't good. I probably failed a couple pop quizzes or tests because it wasn't capturing everything that the professor was saying. So, like when you're writing notes, you're going to mix what the professor's saying. So, it was a challenge for me in college because I didn't have the support like I did when I was in high school and middle school. But to make a story short, when I went to grad school for cyber, I got so much confidence. I'm like, wow, I think it's what it feels like to hear in a class. I was confident to speak in front of the class and cooperate and collaborate with the professor. Like I never had that experience before in college. And I always look back and say, oh, I wish I got the cochlear implant sooner. My life would have been different. But it wouldn't make me who I am today. So,
Right.
what had to kill you makes you stronger. So I'm trying to remember what the question was. Hopefully, I just went on and on.
Yeah, we just kind of wanted to know how that impacted like your ability to learn cyber and succeed in tech. So before we move on from college, so what were the tools that you used to help you in lecture halls and to help you, if any, and if not, what do you think professors and colleges and companies could do to help the hearing impaired with live instruction?
Yeah, so back then I was actually afraid to speak up because, like, you should go to the professor when you first join a new class, like a semester, and tell them, I'm hearing impaired. This is what I need from you. Can you face me when I'm trying to do lip reading? Can you offer additional notes to stuff like that? And also the TVs, now TVs do, but back then some of the TVs that we would watch videos or a movie for a class and they wouldn't have subtitles. And that was difficult for me, but I always reminded them, hey, it's totally a different world now. I think it's much more accommodating. But I also had friends to try to help me as well. But I think today's age is definitely much better than it was before.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that if it comes from your perspective. I feel like there's still a lot of work we could do. But but it's nice to know that at least some progress has been made. It's more of a consideration. It's at the forefront of people's minds. I can see though how back then the mindset was that inconveniences me. I'm not going to do that.
Which is insane though. I'll be honest with you, and not to like, call out something that's personal and close to me, but after going to my son's parent teacher conferences, my son has ADHD, and even stuff like that, they're not willing to accommodate for certain things like this without something like an IEP in place. And it's tough because you still see some of this today where it's like, look, I have 30 kids right now. I can't do this kind of stuff. Right. And you're like,
I can't focus on your one kid. You're
right.
like one kid.
But I'm like, that's literally your job. Right. And I'm shocked that this is even still happening today. So I hate that you had to go through that. But like I said, I feel like it builds, charisma and character. And the fact, like the thing about your story that I love so much is that you were like, I'm going to do this, right? Like you made it a point. You didn't just sit there and go, you know what was me? You kind of used it as like your superpower to be like, hey, I'm going to do this no matter what it takes. And I love that so much. That's what I tell everybody. Like you can always just do your best that you can with what you have. Right. And I seeing you climb to this position that you're in is fantastic. So it's a journey, and I love yours.
Yeah. I also love that people said, you can't learn this. Like, we're not here to accommodate you. You're like, no, I can learn this. Like, I have the brain, I have the capability. Like, I'm going to get the tools and the resources, and I'm going to learn it. And then you're going to perform in this industry. I absolutely love that for you. I thought Lindsey was so inspiring. I'm going to tell a little story right now. I hope it doesn't make Lindsey cry. We were at an offsite together in January of this year for her parent company, who was the prime on one of my contracts at my company. I'm a subcontractor. And, she and I had been Slack colleagues for almost a year at that point. And we finally got to meet each other in person. We went and did karaoke, and we all hung out at the happy hours and stuff. But I was in a conversation Lindsey wasn't a part of. I was in a conversation with one of our TPMs, a technical project manager, and his boss, the CEO of his actual company, another subcontractor on the same contract. And, they were talking about my podcast and how they've heard of it, and they think what I'm doing is great, and da-da-da. And it just kind of, the conversation shifted to like Lindsey. And I was like, I'm in conversations where people talk about her and her limitations. And I'm like, and I don't see any of that. I see that she's a great value add. I see that she's capable. They're like, we love Lindsey. We think Lindsey is insanely capable and insanely talented and really good at her job. And we wish that her company would see that more and give her more and let her do more and excel more. And I just thought it was one of the best conversations Lindsey didn't get to overhear, like these two gentlemen just singing her praises and saying what a capable ISO and project manager they think she is. So just so you know, at least the internal brand you have, you're very well respected, especially. And I'm like, you guys should go tell her that, just so you know. You should walk up to her and tell her how great at her job you think she is. She would probably love that. But anyway, it just kind of goes to show that some people still see the limitations and some people still just see the possibilities, which was lovely for me to witness. So shifting to the professional space, what is it like, being a hearing impaired person, obviously dominated by hearing individuals, especially in tech? How did you have to overcome that to succeed in the tech and cyber space? And how has that journey been for you?
Well, before the workplace, I want to bring up the story because I think it's important. So when I was interviewing for jobs, I remember I would interview with Fortune 500 companies after college, and hundreds of them, maybe 50, maybe not 100, 50. I always had so much anxiety going into those interviews because I've had people ask me, why are you speaking that way? Why you talk like that? And I had to tell them, well, I'm hearing impaired. I can't, I'm wearing hearing aids. But there was also people, I told them, no, I can't hear on the phone, but I would love to be given this opportunity. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, but you can't have this job because we need somebody that can talk on the phone. Email would value back then, but they would talk to me like that. And then and just from the way that I was speaking, I didn't have really good speech back then, but I can tell when they asked me, so have you ever interacted with customers? And when I started speaking, I think I was really nervous, and I can tell that one of them didn't want to continue on with the interview because I think they didn't like the way that I sounded. And I just went through a lot of interviews like that, and I'm just very grateful to be given the opportunity that I am. like have right now. But in the workplace, I've had managers that discriminated me. Like president of the company, I would tell them, "Hey, I want to learn about this department." It was actually a technology department, and we work with customers. And he said, "Well, you have to hear on the phone to do that, so I don't think you should do that." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then I also heard from another coworker, he didn't want me to meet with customers because of the way I spoke. He was embarrassed. He didn't want me to make his company look bad because of my speech impairment. So there's people like that that I had to deal with. But also, I think back then it's all about shifting your mindset. Like right now, we have much better DEI. I mean, we still have work to do, but I think it's all about spreading that awareness. So in the workplace, as a hearing impaired person, people looked at me differently. Like they see it as being disabled, like as a weakness to, oh, you can't do that. But that's a totally different thing. Now, look at all this technology we have. When I first started my job in my previous company, they made sure, like, how can we help you here on the phone? We have special headsets. Do you prefer to have more face-to-face meetings? This is before COVID. And I was like, yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what we need. Like, we need that show that level of respect. And and I was okay to tell people, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm hearing impaired. I would appreciate it if you do this and this and that." So it's us at the responsibility to speak up as well. But people should be aware. People need to understand what it's like to be in that person's shoes and how can we help them and not make them feel uncomfortable. I mean, it's all about shifting that mindset. Like
Yeah.
back in 1990s, that's when ADA was passed. And, before that, everybody had that mentality that a disability is a weakness. It, it's
Right.
something that could be fixed or it needs to be cut out. And I hate to say his name, but Hitler, as an example, that was his first Holocaust victims were people that was disabled because they weren't just like everybody else. They weren't.
Yeah, they were seen as like ulcers on society, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
and I'm not saying that America was ever like that, but just that mindset, looking at the person with a disability, whether it's race, gender, sexuality, it's all of that together.
yeah, no, I would say you're being too kind to America. America's on that shit list too. I'm sorry, but we were not always kind to those who are different. We've done a lot of work, but there's a lot of work still left to go, I
Yeah,
would
and
say.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we don't want to bring that up, but like ADA really changed our lives today. Like all
Mhm.
these people that was protesting, fighting for equal opportunities, even just for disabilities or anybody, it's made an impact today. And now I'm always curious, children that get the cochlear implant today or anybody that's disabled today, I want to hear their stories 20 years later. And I hope to God it's still different than my story of what I've had to experience as well as other people.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
And
I was gonna kind of bring this back to some of the stuff in the industry. So I don't know if you've done a few networking events. I know that your role necessarily isn't, as uh, customer facing as sales would be, for example. So there's a lot on the sales side. There's a lot of conferences, like probably once a month, right? Probably once a week, and that I just don't know about
Yeah,
all.
more than that, yeah.
But right, but on Meryl's side too, right? So in every different part of this industry, there's always networking events, and I would ask you, how has your experience been at those? And are you seeing more of a trend to make those more inclusive for everyone? And if so, what do you think that some of these conferences and different events should be doing to make it more inclusive for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
can you repeat that question again?
Yeah. So just with like conferences and networking events, right, that you've been to, have you noticed that, from back then to now that they're becoming more inclusive? And if they're not, what do you think they could be doing to make it that way for everyone?
Yeah, so I remember, like me, when I worked here in aid, it was always very stressful to go to networking and conference events because you have a lot of people, it's loud, it's overwhelming, and when you have speakers that are on the stand, they didn't really have like subtitles or transcript, that type of technology. But now I've noticed I always wanted to make sure that I was able to sit up in the front just to look at the speaker. So that's one thing. And also, I'm much more confident now to tell people, hey, I'm Lindsay, and if they can't understand me, I'll just tell them I'm hearing impaired. But I know back then it was just very stressful to be in a large group setting. I couldn't pick up the conversation between people. Um, I
Yeah.
think I think the best way for people to help is maybe ask. I mean, I think they do that now. Like, is there any special accommodations you need? Make sure you continue to ask people that so they can feel comfortable being open about it. But I know there are some people that are afraid. They don't want to feel like they're a burden. But
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to change, in the world. I always
Yeah.
felt like I was a burden, and now I don't.
That and I was thinking about the word normal the other night. I was like, what is abnormal and what is truly normal now? Is normal the absence of any, like, normal can't be the absence of any condition at all. Pretty much everyone has a heart condition or an energy condition or something. I mean, it's like there is really no normal. There are just really different flavors of people. And so I feel like asking someone, what do you need from me to make your experience better, is the very least we could do. And this is,
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to ask about that too. Is like Meryl was going down the right path, right? Some folks I know from, just my early days, right? I actually, in high school, I helped with a special ed class and I was a TA there. And that's kind of where I got all of my like life skills for this kind of stuff, right? And so there's a lot of folks out there who almost won't ask because they don't want to come off they don't want to be perceived as rude, or what's the word? Assumptive. So I feel like, what's a good way that you think people who are watching this can be more mindful and things, different phrases or things that they can use to ask? Like you said, Meryl, that was an eloquently put statement there. But are there better ways than others to ask, hey, how can I help you? Is there something that I could be doing better that's more, how would you word that? Or how would you suggest people word that? So that way it's like we talked about in the beginning, right? Hearing impaired versus deaf, right? Some people just go, I don't want to be wrong about either, so I'm just not even going to ask. And then we kind of breed, exclusivity instead of inclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's really about, well, honestly, I think it's about the culture for the company that you work for. I think they should also make you feel comfortable and know how to communicate to the people that are planning events. I think it's really more about the support around you and making sure that people are aware. I just know that I think a lot of people that are disabled, including myself, are much more comfortable speaking up and telling people what we need to be accommodating. But I don't really see I don't see there's anything wrong with how people are planning events right now. I think it's definitely gotten a lot better.
Yeah. I just think it's not like one silver bullet will fix all. Like, even having a sign interpreter for most of the speeches and sessions, like Lindsay is hearing impaired and doesn't sign. So that won't be a fix all, but like, I just think the more that we consider, the more awareness there is around our actions. Like, if I was at a conference with Lindsay, I think even while we were in Hawaii, I would be talking to her and I'm like, yeah. And then, over there, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, she missed all of that. Like, I had to remember to stop, and I can't do the Italian thing where I stop. I keep speaking no matter what room I'm in. I had to speak directly to her so that she wasn't missing so many things. But, it was just like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to do that. And this is totally different, but like when I went to France for the first time, and I took 4 years of French, but like still I couldn't pick up on a lot of things, and people were just like la 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 la, and I was like, excusez-moi, doucement, and they would slow down a little but not enough, and I'm like, no, plus doucement, doucement trop, like very slowly, like speak like I am a toddler. And then they got it and they were happy to do it. But I'm like, I had to just humble myself and say,
right,
I don't understand what's happening. Bring it down to my speed or leave me behind. And, they brought me along, which was nice. So I feel like tech is a place where people will try to bring you along as much as possible.
Yeah.
Lindsay, the last thing I want to ask you, because we've already gone over time, we're going to go slightly over a little more. Since this is a tech podcast, I want to ask you about your vertical in cybersecurity, being an ISO or an information systems security officer. Now, this is a function of compliance. The ISOs are still compliance folks, but we had a GRC person on many episodes ago. And, and we also had Mac on. And when Mac first came in, she was a GRC analyst, so a governance, regulatory, and compliance analyst. And she was asking, where can you go in the compliance realm? And I was like, you could be an ISO, who is like a more technical flavor of that. But will you please tell the audience in your own words about your vertical being an ISO and how you got into that role and kind of what you do every day?
Yeah, so I would say, like, after I graduated my master's in information security, I basically had to start from the ground up because I didn't really have strong technical background. But I started in the identity and access management division at
Great.
bank. Yeah, so I started in that, and I learned about IDM, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I was given an opportunity to learn cyber. And what I mean about that is working with customers and the engineers. So I got exposure to see, what is it like working with an engineer? Sometimes they don't have that much personality, so it's nice to have a person to be in the middle to collaborate with the customer and the engineer. So I really enjoy that. Then I left another company, and that's how I started out as an information security officer. And that was like my dream job because that's like what I wanted to go to school for. And I was like, they can finally gonna get me exposure to cyber. I've always wanted to get into cyber, but it got my foot in the door. So with that opportunity, I've learned how to manage risks for the whole financial institution, just for one particular business unit. But it gave me the opportunity to collaborate multiple different business units as well as the cyber department. And I was like, okay, I'm getting closer. Then finally, I was given an opportunity to work in the threat and fraud intel, which is very interesting. I was only there for a year before I moved to California, but it's given me exposure to understand about threat intelligence. Whatever we learn in college, it's nothing compared to what's happening in the real world.
The real world.
Yeah. So, but that was a really interesting thing to learn. Like I learned about fraud. And then when I moved to California, I knew I wanted to expand my skills and knowledge. And because I was living in Maryland at the time, the job wouldn't allow me to work remotely in California, even though that was after COVID, but it's okay. So I got this opportunity, which is where I am right now as an information system security officer. And I was just like, very honored. And the company I work for, I just want to say they have an amazing DEI program, and I wouldn't be where I am today, but what if for them. So I love my company, and I'm very happy with them. But my current position, so I have the opportunity to work with software engineers, DevSecOps. Like I've never knew what DevSecOps was.
Nobody still does.
Yeah.
Fine. Just keep going. It's still a mystery.
And same with cloud security. And, with my background in risk management, which is similar to GRC, it's giving me more exposure to cyber. Like I'm learning about what Panther detection. I mean, not that I would do that, but just understanding like what's happening in the cyber world. It's just crazy. Like technology is just evolving and changing nonstop. And, as a role as an ISSO, GRC is a tough thing right now. Like there's no one size fit all for every organization. Like, so with my background and experience of working with amazing people in the world, we all come together and just come up with a solution. But so right now I'm a part of a GRC program as well as providing ISSO support for our customers, which I love. So it's been giving me exposure in both worlds. So I'm proud of that. I didn't think I would come this far, to be honest.
Well, I'm so glad you did, because everybody's watching, and I don't know if you've seen the comments, but you're very inspiring to all of us. That's why we have you on here. Your story, it just speaks volumes. So we're so proud of all the things that you've done, and we're very blessed to have you on the show today. So I'm glad that we got to hear about your story. Thanks for sharing it.
And I've missed hanging out with you. It's nice to see you again. With that, we are going to move into our final segment, which is final takeaways. So moving into final takeaways, any last things you want to leave the audience with, whether it's for the hearing impaired or for those of us of the hearing community interacting with the hearing impaired, or anything about cybersecurity in general?
Well, you know, not only as women, but also those with a disability, if you ever feel like you're being held back because of the people that you're surrounded with or something getting in the way, just speak up. Know that there are people out there that can support you. Don't be afraid. There's no reason to be afraid. I mean, we all are allowed to be who we are, who we want to be, and we shouldn't be afraid to show that. And that's what I would tell my young self. Like, you know, all those people that doubted me, all the people that would make fun of me behind my back because I couldn't hear, we don't need people like that in this world. But I think it's more about spreading awareness. We need to advocate. I mean, we need to continue to form allies. And now that I'm a mom of two, I think today, our children today also will make an impact. So we need to teach them to show respect. You know, like I want to go to my son's school and present to the kid what I have. Like I don't want kids to bully other kids if they have a disability or any type of, you know, whatever they have. But I think we need to, it's all about education, spreading awareness, and we need to shift that mindset.
Yep.
If you're disabled, it doesn't mean you're weak. I think it's a strength. Okay, you know, I lose my sight of hearing, my sense of smell, my sense of taste and eyes, it's much stronger. So if you lose one sense, it just makes you stronger in other ways. But yeah, so that's basically what my message is. And that's why I always say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It took me a long time to understand what that quote meant. But that's my life quote. So.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the end of the episode. We're going to cut it. We can walk away now. Lindsey did a fabulous job. We're done.
Yeah, I love that. I'll go next with mine. I think one of my things, since we have, you know, my focus is also on our viewers as well, and knowing how many people from each of our networks are watching. And I think my takeaways for anyone watching today is to be more mindful in all the things that you're doing. So whether it's podcasts or videos or, you know, talk tracks or speaking engagements, just try to be mindful of how can I be more inclusive with this, right? Because you want to be able to capture everybody, and everybody has the same, well, not the same, but most of us have the same need to be included and want to learn and want to be in on all of this. So I feel like, you know, even for me, when I'm doing my videos now, I make sure that closed captions are always on, always. Make sure that that is like standard number one, even though it takes up like that bottom third of the video, it's still worth it, right? You know, when you're doing things like TED Talks or things like that, maybe having somebody that can, you know, do sign language or something else, or you have somewhat of a, like a, what are those called, Meryl? They're like almost prompters so that folks can.
Oh, a teleprompter? Yeah.
Something like that.
With
yeah.
your words.
Something. Just if, you know, if you're a part of any of this, like even if you're doing a TED Talk and you're not in charge of the production or setup, maybe send an email and ask, hey, by the way, are we making this inclusive to everybody? Right. So it's always good to just be aware of it. And then I will say for another thing, right, because I do have a son that is, you know, he is not hearing impaired. However, he does have that, he has a lack of confidence. He's afraid to speak up. He's afraid to stand out. So he will, instead of going up to a teacher and say, I need this to help me, he will not do that. He will just sit there. So I say for all of the people listening, just know that I would try to find an ally, right? That's what helps, because sometimes you'll have a friend. Me, for example, I have Meryl. She stands up for me and says all the things that I'm terrified to say, right? Because sometimes I'm like, I don't want people to think less of me. And she has this eloquent way of putting things. So I think finding an ally is very helpful. And then also in turn, try to be allies, like try to be somebody's ally for them. I think, you know, just being more aware and respectful of everybody is my takeaway.
I love that. I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say, for those of you who are of the advantaged demographics, I don't care if it's humiliating for you to ask, you need to ask, because it's very easy for us to say, how would you like to be labeled? How would you like to be gendered? How can I accommodate you? and to reach out and to do that. And even though it makes you feel awkward, too freaking bad. It's awkward. People have to ask me, like, rather than ask me, how is your name pronounced? They'll just call me Maria. I would much prefer you're just like, how's your name pronounced? Meryl, got it. Thank you. It's very quick, very painless, very easy. So like humble yourself to be able to ask others, not from your point of view, what they need to feel included. And then my other thing is going to be, psychological safety from a culture perspective. Like, if these people with disabilities or who need accommodations do feel brave enough to speak up, don't make it like, or they're like, hey, could you, what? Oh my God, we're stopping again. Where like, don't do that. Just, hi, I'm sorry. Get a person like me. I will stop in a meeting and be like, hi, I'm keeping up with this presentation, but we have folks here in the room who don't know what all these terms mean or who don't know what that is. I'm going to need you to back it up and take it down like several notches to include everybody so everybody understands. And I'm not afraid to do that for people. So get you someone like me who will be like, hi, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say who. There's a deaf person in the room. I'm going to need you to speak directly to us and slow it down. I don't care. So find yourself a me and get comfortable. Those are my takeaways. Lindsey, please tell the good people where they can find you and connect with you. We had a lot of members of the deaf and hearing impaired community in the comments, I'm sure, who found you inspiring. I'm sure they would love to reach out and connect. So where can they find you?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You see my name. It's easy to find me. Or I'm also on Instagram at Lindsey Mitros. Or so feel free to reach out to me there. My Facebook is private. I don't really use Facebook. But LinkedIn, Instagram, and then if you want, I don't want to share my email on here, but
don't do that.
Okay, don't do that. You will sign up for way more than you signed up for if you do that. So don't do it.
But yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to help and answer any questions. There's a lot of things that I can go on about. But yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out to me because I want to help others. I want to inspire others and help them in any way I can.
You do. You're very inspiring. Well, that has been another episode of the Cyber Queens podcast. Thank you for sticking around for an extra long time with us. We appreciate you spending your Friday with us. We hope you have a wonderful weekend and a very happy and safe Halloween for those of you who celebrate it. And we will see you next week. With that, the Cyber Queens are out. Bye.
Bye, guys.